Many of you who have watched this channel have asked me more and more about the sales engineering profession. And for those of you that have seen my past interview with Devin Montgomery, I appreciate all the interest you had and how many of you have reached out asking him questions. We had a chance to sit down and go even further this video into not only how to break into a sales engineering position, setting realistic expectations around what is required to break in the first place, and also talking about, among many other things, how not every sales engineering title is created equally. I know you'll get a lot out of this video, and I would also recommend, if you're on this path after this video, if you haven't seen my first conversation with Devin, it's also a great point of reference for those of you maybe getting started or trying to work your way towards that sales engineering profession. But in any case, as always, I really appreciate Devin's time and insight, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Thanks. Well, hey, Devin, thanks for coming back again. I know, one, I would call out whether before this video, after, we've done an interview in the past kind of about a very deep dive into your journey as a sales engineer. Definitely, obviously want to start there as a good point to reiterate for those watching. And the goal today is really to go even deeper into just the sales engineering landscape, maybe differences as sales engineers applied to many roles, et cetera. And then just more specifically, if I want to break in, how should I consider it on a couple of different ways? But anyway, Devin, great to see you again. And maybe for everyone here, just reiterating how you got to sales engineering, and we'll kick it off from there.
Yeah. So again, great to be back again, Eric. And again, a ton of you have reached out to me from our last video. So just to reiterate kind of my journey into tech. So I started off again as a mechanical engineer. So I worked for a company called Hitachi in the manufacturing side. Then had a lot of great opportunities at that first position. Got a chance to work in Japan, kind of lead projects with our main customer. And that was kind of like my first experience into, a combination of consulting type work versus like customer facing experience. And that was really what drove me to believe that, I wanted to bring these same skills into tech and leverage both my technical skills and my newfound kind of business skills. So that's where I originally started looking around. Okay, how do I actually break into tech? Because essentially, going from mechanical to software really didn't seem feasible at that time. So I actually found a boot camp. And again, those of you who have looked at my LinkedIn, I went to a boot camp called SV Academy, which was basically like an entry-level boot camp for SDR positions. So for that, my mindset was pretty much, there's no way that I can go directly into an SC position, mostly because I would search people's LinkedIns or people who are currently sales engineers or solutions consultants, solutions engineers. And I would see they had, tons of experience, 25, 15 years of experience. And I said, well, let me just break into a tech company first and then kind of maneuver my way through that environment wherever I decide to land. So I went through the boot camp and was able to get a job at the company that I interned at, which was Talend. And it was a very technical company. So it was kind of my perfect entryway into tech because it was, a wide landscape of cloud, database systems, all those different things to kind of leverage my more technical skills. So I started off as an SDR at Talend, and honestly, it was rough. Those first 3 months, were hard as an SDR because I still remember my manager used to tell me like, you're super smart, you're intelligent, but you have to turn that engineering hat off and think in the mind of like an SDR. And when I tell you, it was like a light bulb just went off and it was like, you're right. Like I don't have to know all the technical stuff to be a successful SDR. Let me just focus on this role so that I can get to where I need to be and just really build in that business development skills and kind of the discovery type skills. So in the midst of doing that, I was constantly, immediately, even in the interview process, I was telling leadership that, look, I don't want to go the AE route. I want to go the SC route. Like I want to become a sales engineer. I have an engineering background. That's kind of the path I want to take. And they were very, open to it. They were very supportive of it. And so immediately I got in touch with kind of like the senior director of engineering or sales engineering at Talend. And we essentially worked together, me and another friend of mine named Irvin. We worked together to create pretty much a junior SE position because, again, in that data space, it's very, very difficult to break into that position because you have to have tons of years of knowledge, experience, customer facing experience within that industry in order for companies to feel comfortable enough to have you kind of leading those technical discussions with, technical personas. So we were able to successfully create that. But then my manager ended up going to a company called Snowflake. So within that, went back into another kind of hybrid SDR/SE role. But then from there, I went into a post sales position at a company called Twilio. So that post sales position, which is called an onboarding engineer or a kind of implementation type engineer, that kind of opened my eyes to see, which I've been kind of, leading a lot of other people down this path as well, is that there are so many other roles that we'll touch on a bit later, but there are so many other roles that are so similar to the SE position to where you're interacting with the customer, you're troubleshooting, you're, doing discovery with the customer and really helping to provide that value, but mostly in a post-sales position. But with that, it kind of, leveraged both my pre-sales and, technical skills, and now diving into the post-sales side. That helped me springboard me to where I am now as a more lead sales engineer, to where, again, I'm back on the pre-sale side, but more so in kind of a bit higher than the entry level position. I do have a lot more responsibilities as a lead engineer. You're responsible for, helping guide newer SCs that come into the company. You're responsible for, helping automate certain processes. You just have a lot more responsibility. So that's kind of my journey from starting from a mechanical engineer to an SDR to a more post-sales role to now, again, lead sales engineer. So
yeah, awesome. And I think you hit on a few things I definitely want to dive into, especially around, for instance, sales engineer is used for many different types of sales engineering jobs and roles.
Yep.
I know you mentioned the specific focus on cloud technologies, databases, et cetera, and maybe kind of help someone who's looking into sales engineering for the first time understand the difference between a sales engineering job at Snowflake, at Twilio, at AWS versus sales engineering at other companies.
Yeah. And this is a big question that comes up as well. So to really touch on what you said, the SE position is not created equally, unfortunately. So you can have a company like Twilio, again, where it's more cloud telecommunications based, or like a company like in the more retail space with POS systems, where it's kind of directly dealing with a more consumer facing type product, to where you might not have to be as technical, but you do have to be able to have that conversation with customers, be able to provide that value. Again, different type of role, but compared to a company like where I'm at right now, where Calibra, where you're dealing with a ton of kind of interlocking systems. So you have like cloud database systems, on-prem type systems like SQL warehouses, and data governance type conversations, business analytics type conversations, data science, all of these different industries and kind of products in the industry all come together within kind of this one tool set. So when you have a SC position at a company like that, you have to be able to at least understand that your role is not tied to your specific product. Your role is tied to how do you provide value and explain how that product fits within these multiple different systems, compared to, again, a company like Twilio, where it's kind of like, it's a lot more streamlined. And typically at companies like that, sometimes the AE can handle a majority of those conversations, and you might come in as more support. So that's where another way that I've kind of told a lot of newer SEs trying to break in, depending on that industry, again, comparing like my previous company to like the company that I'm at now, you might either be a more support type role, to where the AE can just run the full cycle themselves, and you just come in as like, that additional technical resource or technical support. You might not even run a demo the entire sales cycle. You might just be responsible for API conversations or helping hand off to the post sales role, versus kind of the company I'm at now. You have to have an SE. There's no way you're going to close a deal without the SE. You're in discovery, you're doing multiple demos, you're doing workshops, you're doing architecture reviews, you're doing post-sales handoffs, you're doing virtual webinars, all these different things, because it's just a difficult product. It's a technical product. So that's why when you're looking into the industry you want to go in, again, focus on what are they asking you for? Where does that product or industry fit in? And what are your skill sets that you can migrate over, or kind of transition over, or, transfer over into that industry? Because again, a company that's more cloud based with those multiple systems, it might not be the best one to try as your first SE position, but a company where it's kind of like a more streamlined, B2C type product to at least get your feet wet within, working and, doing discovery questions or kind of qualifying, helping, initial demos, having that interlock between AEs and SEs, that can definitely help springboard you to one of those positions like I'm at, to where, you can really streamline the rest of your career. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, because as I'm sure you've seen, I've seen sales engineers with all types of backgrounds where maybe they were a developer for 2 or 3 years and it was a logical transition within their company to then become a sales engineer.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and maybe set the scope for me if I'm not thinking broad enough or otherwise, but if I'm breaking in, do I find maybe a lower tech company, like you mentioned, maybe business to consumer, a slightly sophisticated software product that I'm not writing code in?
Mm-hmm.
Is that good to get that sales engineer badge on the resume? Or do I want to pursue potentially other paths like yours where I guess you do have the engineering background, but you go that SDR route within that company, you're given an opportunity to go to sales engineer? Is there one answer? How would you kind of break that down?
Yeah, I wish it was one answer there, Eric.
Yeah.
Honestly, because a lot of times I think about my path and I always think and wonder, like, could I have done it a different route? And it really just depends. And what I always tell people as well is that it's a combination of, again, your skill set, your technical skill set, the industry that you're looking to get into, and a bit of luck as well. So, you have to get the right timing of where that company is at. So where you're starting out at, personally, what I've seen is that a lot of great SEs do start in, more support type roles, because in those support roles, you're figuring out exactly what the customer wants. And usually you're kind of that last leg of resort. You have to be very technical, but also have that more business acumen of understanding, or kind of building that empathy for the customer as well, kind of just working with them on a day-to-day basis. And within those type of roles, you're learning everything about that product. You're finding kind of the nooks and crannies that even the SC or the more technical resources don't even know, because you're hearing this on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of times the best SCs that I've seen might come from a support role, and they might have been in that role maybe 2 years, 3 years, and then kind of transition. And it's an easier transition than compared to coming in as an SDR, because unfortunately, even though I got in from an SDR position, again, it was a lot of internal work that I had to do. And again, still a bit of luck, because I was at a company that was really open to me kind of blazing my own path. So coming in as an SDR, you really, people are going to try to box you in for you to go the AE route or customer success, or kind of more marketing roles. So you have to really be diligent within your company, build that internal champion, work with the SE department constantly, weekly, monthly, to let them know, like, hey, when something comes up, make sure to keep me in mind for the next position. Or like, if we can build a more junior position, like, let me run that. Like, you really have to build your own case within companies like that. But yeah, I definitely recommend starting off as a more, technical support type role. Anything that, again, gets you in front of that customer, like, that's usually the easier path that I see. Most people go from, straight entry level tech to a more SC type position, or even, into product type positions. That's usually the easier route that I see.
Sure. And I am curious too, if there's obviously coding boot camps are still very large and prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, if I'm going through a coding boot camp as an example, is it reasonable for me to expect that sales engineering is a potential first job out of that boot camp? Or should, in addition to things like support, maybe an entry-level associate developer or something like that, kind of, is that realistic to maybe think, if I go through a coding boot camp, I go directly to sales engineer?
I don't think it's realistic. at all, because again, the coding boot camps are teaching you specifically what they're made for you to become a developer or get into a more software engineering type path. They're not teaching you, again, the discovery type skills, working with AEs, building empathy, sales methodologies. They're not teaching you all that. They're teaching you to be that technical resource. And so again, what I have seen as well, though, is that maybe you're a sales person, maybe you've been in AE previously, or maybe you even in SDR, but you went through a coding boot camp. So now you've built out those skills to where you can have both of them on your resume. Like, look, I have coding experience. I've done projects. I know how to actually talk to developers because I essentially am one at this point. And more companies might be a little bit more lenient to say, like, all right, you have that background to actually speak our main persona's language. Like, we sell to developers or kind of more technical personas, so they might be a little bit more lenient on allowing you to say, all right, let's bring you in as a more entry level SE. Again, depends on the company, depends on where they're at right now, depends on what openings they have. But yeah, those are the paths I can usually see. But again, if you're going through a coding boot camp, people are going to want you to be a software engineer or software developer. So definitely not realistic to think you can go straight to an SC position from there.
Sure. And I'm curious too, obviously having the channel, I get people asking me about tech sales. I help as best as I can. I appreciate everyone too from the last conversation we had. It sounds like you're getting a lot of folks reaching out to you. I'm curious whether it's through those messages, through just helping other people offline, if you will. What are maybe like common misconceptions or common things that when I'm starting at zero, I should better understand before just kind of blindly like thinking I can send out an application, et cetera?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I've seen, and it honestly sometimes it hurts me because I feel like I constantly have to reset expectations, because unfortunately I've definitely seen in other people in our SC community, we've seen that there's been a huge interest of breaking into the SC role, which is great. But unfortunately, some of the kind of methodologies that people are kind of talking about and saying, like, hey, I broke into the SE role in 3 months, 4 months. Unfortunately, guys, it's just not realistic. Again, not impossible, but it's just not realistic, because most of the times what we see for people who are able to break into those roles, they've had 10 years of experience in a specific industry, and they're able to kind of transfer those skills into that same or similar industry. So you might have 15 years in finance. You can break into an SE role or solutions consultant role at a finance-based company, or more 15 years in healthcare. You can break into a health tech type company. That's very realistic, because you have that almost consulting like experience that hiring managers are looking for. But if you're coming in as, again, someone with barely any career experience, and again, I say this because I want to help people, because I've seen how people kind of stay stuck within this path of trying to break into tech and just they're not going for the roles that fit them. If you don't have any sort of experience, you don't have any sort of boot camp experience or no certifications, you're just starting from scratch, your first mindset should be, let me at least break into a tech company. Let me find somewhere, or think about the top 5 industries that I want to be in, then think about the top 5 companies within those industries, and then look at the roles that are kind of being advertised or kind of being shot out now for that specific company. So if you see that they have like SDR positions open, or entry level technical support, or even entry customer success, associate customer success, something like that, those are more entry level roles that are more realistic for you to break into. Because again, with the SE role, the SE role is essentially, even if you see entry level, it is a more senior level role. Unfortunately, unless you see kind of associate SE, most SE roles are more senior level positions, and they want to see you have multiple years of experience in that specific kind of industry, unless you're already an SE and breaking into another industry, because again, those are transferable skills. So again, what I usually tell people is, or what I ask people are kind of, where are you at in your career? What are you looking to accomplish? And I usually tell them from there where you should start. If you don't have that technical background, or you don't have any sort of consulting type business type background, and you haven't been working in that for, at least 2 years, it's going to be tough to break into an SE role. And again, I've seen people who have gone through these boot camps, and even 4 or 5, 6 months later, they're still struggling to get a position because, again, someone has told them that you can do this in 3 months. And again, that's just not realistic, guys. Like, you really have, if you really want to break into tech, you have to fit where you are. You have to fit that company and that career to where you currently are in your career. So
Yep. No, well said. And I'm curious, maybe getting a little bit more philosophical, if you will, but I know, credit to some folks that I partner with, et cetera, that are providing college alternatives altogether. I'm curious from your perspective, and maybe, again, a question that doesn't have a singular answer, but maybe I'm 18, or maybe I tried college for a bit, it didn't work out. If I do kind of focus in and want to go that engineering route, do you still, how would you evaluate, kind of looking back, are there potential alternatives of boot camps in place of college and maybe getting those more entry-level customer support roles? Or how much do you value that 4-year degree? Do you think it's still worth the cost, et cetera?
that is a great question. And like you said, it depends. There's always a, this side or this side. I think there's definitely still a place for 4-year degrees, because unfortunately, as much as we're kind of shifting away towards that, depending on the company and everything, it's still very valued. And what you see is that most people who break into tech have 4-year degrees, or most people who kind of rise the ranks into the more senior level positions, director positions, everything, they have 4-year degrees or MBAs or something like that. Unfortunately, that's just the landscape. Now, if I'm 18 years old and I'm looking to first break into tech, definitely there are definitely places for that, because again, previous companies, I've seen people who have gone either straight out of college to a tech support role, or straight out of high school to a tech support role, work that position maybe 3 or 4 years, and again break into a senior tech, or maybe again post sales, or jump right into a SC position. But again, that depends on where you're at. If you know a 4-year degree just isn't for you, and you know exactly what you want to do, then yeah, that's where those boot camps and those certifications come into play, as long as you have the right guidance around it. Because one thing I also see is a lot of people kind of just go out and get these random certifications. Like, they go and get, this CRM based certification or the security based certification. And again, yeah, it can be good, but if you're going for a telecommunications company, that CRM certification isn't going to be applicable. So again, you have to have that kind of guidance around, all right, and really just move with intention. Like, why am I getting this certification? Why am I taking this boot camp? Like, what are the steps that I need to take in order to do that? So again, yeah, tons of ways you can go about it. Definitely see honestly, I don't see the 4-year degree completely going away, because again, we it's just going to be there. But again, those alternative paths are definitely ways for people who know what they're trying to do or know where they're going, to help break them into these type of positions in tech or this type of industry. So
Nice. And yeah, I think one thing, I know we've touched around it, but I think this would be a good place to go deeper as well. Regardless of how we get there, we break into a tech company. Maybe we're an SDR, maybe we're in this customer success role. And I know you've talked about, kind of setting that intention, and I totally agree, but more specifically, right? What does that look like 6, 12, 18, 24 months in? How soon do you express that desire to move to sales engineer? What are things that you should make known? And also, what are things that you should be doing kind of in silence, if you will, if that is narrow enough of a question for you to answer?
Yeah.
So,
That's a great question as well. I say, and again, this is personally what I did. I let it be known from the very beginning within the interview process. Like, look, I'm coming in here to just kill it as an SDR, but my role is to become an SE. So again, set expectations from the beginning, so that again, if you're at a good company, they're going to be excited about helping you out to get to that role. But again, they're still going to expect you still have this job to do before we get you there. So being up front from the beginning, again, helped me a ton really get into this position. Now, as far as with the things that, like you said, what can you start sharing, what you should probably keep under wraps, I think again, letting it be known that especially if you're, let's just say for an SDR example, you're coming in, you're first started, you let them be known that, look, I want to become an SE. Again, let your direct manager know that, like, look, I'm going to start working on Friday evenings after work, or kind of like Friday lunch breaks with the SE department, or I'm going to be shadowing the SEs doing this, blah, blah, during these specific time frames. But again, I'm still doing my main job, still working with my SE, AEs, but within this kind of hour, 2 hour blocks throughout the week, I want to start working on, working with the SE department. So those are the type of things you should share, again, because you're being transparent about your time and your manager knows about your time. And again, that's a big thing about SDR. Sometimes you have to over communicate those things. What you probably shouldn't do is tell them, tell your manager, like, hey, look, I've been demoing the platform during my calls and stuff like that, or I've downloaded this, or I've done, like, diving into the more technical side of things, things that you probably should be doing outside of work. Again, they might, depending on the manager, they might appreciate it, but again, that's not directly related to your job, because again, as an SDR, your role is to qualify, pass it on to the AE, set those meetings. You're not going to be demoing anything. Again, those are more side projects. So again, you do have to be really strategic on, all right, maybe I shouldn't tell my manager or my manager's manager that I'm kind of doing this with the SE org, but at least let them know, like, hey, these are these times of the week that I want to dedicate to, going into my next role. Now, the time frame behind that, again, this is something that I had to kind of bite myself, and it was hard for me to kind of accept. I came in thinking that, all right, I'm going to come in as an SDR and I'm going to get that promotion within at least 8 months, And I still remember in my first interview, the director of sales said, all right, you want to be an SE? It's probably going to take 2 years. And I was like, two years? No way. It took me like a year and a half, a little over a year and a half to do it, almost 2 years. Because again, you have to show consistent success in your role for your kind of managers to kind of vouch for you to even get promoted to the next level. So let alone kind of transfer to another department. And so that's where, again, if you want to stay within that company, you have to show consistent success. So kind of exceeding quota. Like, I was exceeding my quota every single quarter. After that the first quarter was horrible. But once things kind of got rolling, I was exceeding my quota every single quarter for like that next year. And so that gave my manager a case to say, like, all right, we want Devin to kind of start working with this associate type position for the SE team. But yeah, just be realistic on the time frame, guys. I'd say give yourself, again, at least a year and a half until you can get to your next position, unless you're going the AE route. If you're killing it as an SDR, again, depends on the organization. Typically, they want to promote you quickly to an AE position to where you can really start closing. So sometimes that can take a little less time. But if you're looking to jump into an SE role or customer success type roles, give yourself like a year and a half. If usually that doesn't happen, you can always jump companies beforehand if needed, because again, leverage the skills that you've learned at your current company and kind of leverage them to kind of get you to that next position as well. So I'm a big proponent of, if a company is not kind of supporting your career path, then definitely kind of go somewhere else. So.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a few good points, and reiterating and also kind of transitioning to a different question. Like, I think on the sales management side, in the example that you go in as an SDR, very fine to make it known. But to your point, maybe you have a quarterly kind of check-in or like review as an example. Yeah. And that might be the time to just barely mention it and kind of over time increase the frequency with which you're doing it. But to your point, I do think you will get a lot of exposure as an SDR to sales engineering as a whole, whether you're sitting in on demos, surely you're going to meet folks via Zoom or in person, pending your situation. And so that's kind of my next question as well, right? I'm an ambitious SDR or entry-level person in tech, and I want to start building my network and internal champions of sales engineers at that company. What do I come to you with as a senior sales engineer now that shows you that I'm actually serious and not just like, hey, I want to be a sales engineer? Because you're going to be like, that's great. I don't have time for this. Like, leave me alone, right? So. But
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, like kind of to your main point that you just said, as an SDR, you're going to be sitting on a lot of demos as well. If you're shadowing your AE or jumping on those discovery calls, typically there's going to be an SE on that call as well. Usually, if not, they'll be on the next call. So within your main pod that you're in, again, you'll have those kind of main 3 or 4 or 5 SEs that you're constantly having interactions with, or even if they're just on the calls. So I'd say start with them. Start with them, maybe even start shooting them or adding them to the discovery calls yourself, but also forwarding them any sort of technical notes that you have. So, you might forward your AE the more BANT related or medic related type questions, budget, need, authority, all those things. But if you get any sort of technical questions, loop in the SE and say like, hey, these are the type of questions that the prospect had around our product. This is kind of their current workflow, their current landscape. Basically, what do you think of this, or kind of anything else that I probably should have mentioned or asked about during this qualification process. And again, that's initially going to show the SE that, okay, they actually care about what I'm looking to, the questions I usually might ask to help build my demo, or maybe ask some additional questions in the discovery call that I might not have had time for to do. So as you start building that rapport with your SE, then again, that's where you start building that champion. Like, hey, Devin, like, hey, we've had a couple calls together, like had passed some notes to you. Do you mind if I just get around, 15, 30 minutes on your calendar just to discuss, learn a little bit more about your role? Again, building that internal champion, and jump to the next SE. Like, hey, I've been working with Devin on this, like, and he said XYZ. Do you believe this is the same? And just make your face known, because even as an SC right now, even for me to get to that next level of the SC, like a more principal level SC, like you have to do things that are outside of your role in order to get promoted. And unfortunately, some people kind of just want to sit back and just do their day-to-day job, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to get to that next role, unfortunately, you do have to kind of step out, find your own projects, meet people in other departments, know who to go to in those other departments. So as an SDR, you have to do the same thing. So to get to the SE position, that's what you'll need to do. Reach out to those SEs, really dive down into what is it that they care about in those discovery calls. From that point, you can kind of build that relationship from there. They'll probably start helping you, build out sample demos or anything. If something comes up, they'll kind of reach out to their manager and tell their manager about you. Like, hey, we have this SDR Eric who's really looking to be SE, and the manager's probably already, oh yeah, I know about Eric. I know about him. So again, just those little tidbits. Again, just you want the hiring manager to remember your name, basically. And that's kind of what I had in my first company. Was like, I made sure that the SE manager knew my name, like whenever. So whenever it was brought up, he already knew. So yeah.
Yeah. No, well said. And there's no perfect combination, but I think to your point, it's like if you're the person that naturally networks, that's going to be an easy thing for you to do to build the internal champions. But I do think, on the flip side is, if you're that networking and extroverted people person, if you will, it's easy to overlook the value of, especially your first maybe 6 to 9 months in a role, like always having it done right. Doesn't mean it has to be even super insane, right? But you never miss a beat. You've always got the information that someone else needs. You make everyone's life easier. And you kind of, in addition to being maybe a great networker, you've now also subconsciously like communicated that you will be effective at pretty much anything with enough sustained focus and effort, et cetera. So don't want to get too meta and TED talky, but I think it's really great points. And I guess, I think that covers it from my end in terms of, some of the vantage points. I think you have a great vantage point kind of coming from being in and around it. But to your point, I think especially in sales engineering, it really takes a lot of focus and explicit desire to get there. It's not, I easy blanket statement, feel free to disagree, but I think it's much easier to find yourself in a sales role than it is like just to like, I guess I'll try the sales engineering thing, right? Like it's not that easy. So, but I'd also call out, to everyone watching, really appreciate Devin for being willing to take some of the messages that you have. I'm curious, Devin, on your end, if there's anything major I missed, and or for anyone messaging you, if you want to set expectations around, the kinds of things you'd want to know before just saying, how do I break in, right? Anything on your mind?
Yeah, I'd say again, and really appreciate everyone who's reached out to me. Again, a lot of you guys have some great backgrounds. You've been really cool to interact with. One thing I have seen across, you know, some conversations is that, you know, what I mentioned previously was that you really have to know where you're at in your career. So if you know kind of you're reaching out, you want to, pick my brain or anything, kind of ask about, how do I break in this into this position? Again, one of the biggest points that I made in my previous video is that some of the best SEs that I've ever met, they're not super technical, but they're not super salesy. They're like have that right mixture of both, basically. And really, they have conversations with customers on calls because they have that experience. So when you're reaching out, make sure that you don't want to just kind of throw out like, "Hey, I've done this boot camp, I've done this, and blah blah blah. These are my transferable skills." Like that's all great, but again, you want to be a real person because that's similar to what's going to happen when you're on these calls with these customers or these C-level execs. They want to have a conversation with a real person. So tell me about, what are you looking to do? What's your background? Why are you looking to break into tech? What's going on with you right now that kind of inspired you to break into tech? And of course, we all know about the money, we know about the freedom and all those things. And again, that's another conversation, do the layoffs and all this stuff. Again, that's a whole nother conversation. But to really survive and retain yourself in the tech, you have to have something deeper than just the monetary aspect of it. Unfortunately, again, like you have to find that company that where it's like, all right, I can really see myself, um, you know, I can really see this company, elevating my career, basically. And unfortunately, that might take that might take a few times of trying this company. But again, I say tech allows that freedom. But when you're reaching out, again, just make sure you're having a conversation, and I'm trying to help guide you to that. So again, depending on where you are, it's not going to be a one size fits all. You might need to go the SDR route based off of your background. You might need to go the technical support route based off of your background. I've told people like, hey, you have a technical background, maybe you should go for these type of companies that are hiring for these post-sale positions. And again, they might pay just as much as an SC position. You're doing the exact same thing, but you're post-sales. And again, I've seen a lot of people kind of open their eyes to that as well, to where saying, hey, I didn't even think about post-sales or professional services type roles. So again, it's not a one size fits all thing, guys. And that's why I really strive, or look forward to, like, when you actually tell me like, this is my background, this is what I'm looking to accomplish. Based off of that, where do you think I should go? And that's a really a big thing that I've seen been successful. And yeah, just looking forward to doing more of that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and I always appreciate the perspective, and I think it's so invaluable too, especially if you're not in that tech world and trying to break in. It's like I feel like you kind of get tunnel vision on like, okay, sales
Mhm.
engineer is a role, that's what I want. But
Right.
even the knowledge of post sales, pre sales, these
Hmm.
types of things really gives you a leg up and makes you sound even more confident. Even if you want the sales engineering role, the fact that you know the difference between those two gives me a
Exactly.
lot more confidence that you're competent, et cetera, et cetera. So
Exactly.
yeah. But no, as always, Devin, really appreciate the insight. And if I missed anything, feel free to let me know. But I thought this was a great talk. And hopefully for everyone listening, you're getting a lot out of it. And like I mentioned, Devin's LinkedIn will be in the description below if you do want to reach out. But Devin, thanks again. And any other thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, no, again, been great talking to you again, Eric. And yeah, just looking forward to doing having any other conversations, or yeah, just looking forward to be back. So
Awesome. All right. Well, appreciate it. And we'll see everyone next time.